Okay, so unfortunately there's not much in terms of design discussion I can really go through today, as most of it's just been, creating some of the project so far. So, what I'm showing you now is the idle section of the game. So this is the 2D movement, and you can also pick up this bucket and drop the bucket. And you can, if you move in a certain direction, you can actually chuck the bucket. Now the idea with this is I wanted to change the traditional kind of format of an idle clicker where you usually have to just press some buttons. I thought, hey, maybe I could make it a little bit more like a farming sim, in the sense that you physically have to move stuff around, because I think that there's a little bit more involved, and it's, if I'm going to make an idle clicker, I might as well make something slightly interesting, or at least more interesting. So what I did just there was I emptied the emptied the tube that contains all of the goblin juice that could be used in battle. And when I pull this little lever here, it's not a lever, it's a red box at the moment, but it fills up this bucket. Only when it's underneath it though. So what you'll notice is if I just let that go and I press that, it may turn green because it's broken a little bit, but actually it doesn't do anything. And what you'll notice here is that this one's got nothing in it, as the white is the signifier for that it has juice in it. And if I show you what I do with the bucket, chucking it, and there you go, that will spawn a little bit of goblin essence in there. And the idea being that this cube is representative of the brewer, so the idea is that then slowly over time, this is a little bit faster than I want it to be, but slowly over time that will fill up. And then, as demonstrable here, it can then be emptied just like the other barrel. This also has a lower capacity overall, despite the fact that they're the same size. But that's just so that, there's some kind of risk. Also, you'll notice, if I do this again, the amount being added to here and the amount being added to here are slightly different. And that's because this bucket will be filled up to a unit of 10, like 10 goblin units, which is not actually worth 10 goblins. It's worth about 2 goblins. That gets halved when it gets thrown in here. Oh, sorry, it gets shrunk down to a 10th, so you only get 1 unit. So you effectively, just to make that actually clear, for every 10 drops of goblin juice, you get 1 brewable goblin juice unit. And that's so that there's a cost to brewing, so it takes at least a little bit of time before you start to see your money back, similar to an idle clicker where you spend the money and then you get the money back later. Other than that, nothing really else here. So I haven't just been spending my time playing around with the idle mover or the idle clicking movement thing. I've not really decided how to phrase that, but the idle section isn't just but what I've been doing. I've also been working on the I guess what you describe as the lowest basic version of the RTS combat. So if I click a couple of times here, this will kind of show you what happens. So as you click, they'll spawn. This should have a little timer on it, but that's kind of not necessary right now. And these are most of the goblins that I've made, and see how they're working. The blue goblins have clearly been the ones I've not actually animated properly, but I'm not really too fussed about that for now. So if I jump out of this for a second and I bring in one of my very special guests. Now I don't know if you recognise this heroic legend, whom is protecting the human race from goblin interference, but he's going to help me demonstrate some of the processes that the goblins go through. So as you can see, the goblins walk along, and the second they see the beast that is this heroic human legend, they scramble for more stuff to protect them, and they have a certain stop distance. So for instance, the spears stop here. If I was clever, I would have already had these set out, but what I've realised now is I'm going to have to let the randomisation. Okay, the shield's just right there. Please be something else. Okay, that's more shields. This is also the problem with playtesting this, is it's, I can't necessarily predict what is going to come out. The swords are just there, and what you'll notice is once this guy gets a target, he actually is the only one that animates at the moment. And you'll see that as each time he attacks, he actually is dealing damage to the beast, the human guardian. But the problem is that he has way too high of a health for you to actually see it. If I turn the health back down, you can probably see it, but that's not important for now. And the last one is, if I can, I'm just going to keep on spamming them now, just so I can show you where the archers form. Okay, the archers are just there at the back. Now what you'll notice is as these extra ones form, they actually go to their area and then fall back. And the reason for this is that it's so that there's a limited amount of goblins that could be taking up one space. So there's a rank of 3 here and a rank of 3. They're all ranks of 3. But I knew that there was going to be a randomization, so I thought they needed so the players not necessarily deciding when the goblins are spawning or what type of goblins are spawning in terms of weapons. So they need to have some way of putting aside other goblins without it overwhelming or really unbalancing the combat. So I thought it made a little bit more sense to have kind of a back row of goblins, the best way to describe it. And they need a little bit more work in terms of how they're positioned, so they're positioned more organically. But for the time being, I think this is a good example of what is going on. You can see the health slowly going down. Slowly. Now with the aid of this unspecified individual, I'll be able to show some of the other movement options or goblin options. So the red goblins, as previously mentioned, although they don't have their own animations, they will only get spears and swords. They won't actually receive any other types of weapons. In fact, if I carry on clicking this, they won't actually find any. And because the units will have a little bit of a higher cost, I think that should balance it out somewhat. The yellow goblins, and look, I mean, I have to specify how fast these are. They'll only pick up shields and arrows. Or short bows. Oh, that was the thing. Someone suggested, in my video I said I couldn't think of a way of phrasing bows with an S at the beginning, and I got frustrated by that, and then someone just pointed out I could do short bow, and I feel really fucking stupid. Either way, the goblins at the back, either way, you can see that this is the kind of structure I was talking about before. Although they're not the same colour as the how they spawned, that's just because I haven't made separate animations for them at the moment, and I need this to just playtest. Effectively though, this is all functioning as intended. Now, let me show you a little bit closer to what the combat's going to look like. So every 5 seconds you'll see a brave warrior come out, and this is because the main warriors are designed to, or the AI that controls the enemies doesn't really control them necessarily, but what it does is it decides how many of those types of enemies need to be spawned. So you'll notice that they turn up in ranks, so there's 2 there, and 2 will be at the back. This is because they're larger and they have double the health of the, well, actually more than double. Most goblins have about 8 health, which is equivalent to about 2 hits from a human, and the human enemies have about 20 health. But the difference is that they can't make decisions. They can't spawn extra enemies. They can't spawn extra versions of themselves, so they can't have a back rank. Whereas the goblins can have a back rank, but of course it's a cost. There's a fixed cost for the goblins because there's a limited amount of resources they have that's set in the idle stage. Whereas the humans have a kind of unlimited resource, but they don't overspend. So effectively it allows the player to push forward. So if I grab a bunch of red boys. And hopefully this will just cause the enemies to die very quickly. The only ones that have no real function at the moment are the spears, and that's mostly just because I couldn't be asked to actually implement how their loop works. So in terms of design, or at least programming in the future, there's not really much else to do outside of the core functionality. The only thing I need to do is make sure that the blue goblins actually do their spawning tactic, which is to obviously search for longer and to drop other weapons. And there's already a function inside of the goblins that allow them to check the ground, so they'll be able to check the ground through the weapons, hopefully, ideally. Okay, so what do I intend to be doing next week? So I think it's reasonable to suggest that I could get the blue goblin done, because that's one specific system. I also want to make sure that it is fully playable, as in like I can go between the two scenes, as well as having some kind of saving system. The saving will be pretty simple because it only needs to save a couple of ints. It doesn't necessarily need to save a whole position and all that kind of stuff. It just needs to save some numbers, which isn't too difficult. I'm also going to add all of the tanks into the idle stage and then have them turn off via some kind of game manager, or at least that scene manager, so that I can make it so that when a player completes a certain mission, they can receive a reward, and then I can save that from the kind of scene manager, because effectively the only thing that needs to be saved in that game, the only thing that needs to be saved in this game is the idle section, really. Also, I found a way of kind of jerry-rigging and like a background ticker. Effectively, it will just take the time that you leave the game and the time that you continue the game, and then it will calculate how much time has passed in between those two, and then it will give you the equivalent amount of goblin brewed juice.